Sharing the Power, a Voter's Voice special, is brought to you in part by the Denton Appleton Baldwin Fund and by members like you. Thank you.
To protect this at-large system does not promote fair and equal representation.
Well, we all thought we were going to go to jail, and we were ready to go to jail.
We had a number of shootings. I mean, the city literally was a powder keg.
Dallas's single-member district lawsuit took 3 torturous years. If you walked into a Dallas City Council meeting in 1988, you'd have seen mostly white elected officials. You also might have seen one of the frequent protests staged by minorities who felt their voices and needs were ignored. I'm Sam Baker. During this half hour, Sharing the Power, a Voter's Voice special, will look back at a lawsuit that changed how Dallas elects its council members and examine the effects of single-member districts. Most agree what's known as the 14-1 voting plan opened the doors of government to people of color. But did 14-1 improve Dallas? And are single districts the answer for North Texas suburbs now facing the racial tension Dallas experienced 20 years ago? In the late 1980s, blacks and Hispanics made up half of the population in Dallas, but around the council table at City Hall, they held only a quarter of the seats. For decades before, it was even more exclusive. The Dallas City Council remained all white until 1967. Then for many years, no minority was elected without the support of the Dallas business community. Back then, police shootings and economic disparity in minority neighborhoods had also created simmering anger. At Dallas City Hall, it reached full boil. As Dallas City Council member Diane Ragsdale and members of a police support group traded accusations about the shooting of a black off-duty officer. 6 years before Ron Kirk would become the first black mayor of Dallas, racial tension shut down almost every council meeting.
I don't know that race relations have ever been worse than they were then. There had been a number of very high profile, unfortunately, and bad experiences between the police department at the time and the African American community. We had a number of shootings of police officers by black citizens. You had police shoot and kill 2 elderly black residents. I mean, the city literally was a powder keg.
Year after year, blacks and Hispanics watched the racially unbalanced city council approve housing and business development in North Dallas, while the southern and West Dallas neighborhoods declined. Future council member Domingo Garcia joined the protests.
There was 2 African Americans on the council at the time and no Latinos. And from there, we said we need to have representation so that we can change the police department, change how City Hall was reacting to a large portion of its constituents that were locked out and left out.
Get your Oak Cliffs to see t-shirt.
Eventually, anger stretched beyond black and brown. Anglo voters in Oak Cliff felt abandoned by the city too. Future council member Bob Stinson was part of a group threatening to secede.
So we had a group at that point in time, if you'll remember history, it was a group that was looking at secession. And that was one of the options that we were contemplating to deal with fair services to the Oak Cliff area of the city.
Community activist Marvin Crenshaw and Roy Williams blamed the divisiveness in Dallas on an unfair election system.
We were left with no other alternative but to come back to the court.
They decided to continue a fight started in the 70s by future council member Al Lipscomb.
You can't tell me.
I'll bet you a $10 bill I can put you down.
I'll bet you can't, sir. I'm talking.
Your Honor, remove this man.
Lipscomb had successfully sued the city, forcing Dallas to adopt a system known as 8-3. Voters were separated into 8 geographic districts. Each district chose one of 8 council members. Everyone in the city would elect 2 additional council members and the mayor. But Crenshaw and Williams argued that did not go far enough. The district still covered a lot of territory, and most minorities could not afford to compete.
When you would run for that large seat, you would need to at least have a war chest of $300,000 to $400,000.
and that was hard to for candidates to raise, in particular people of color.
Dallas was in the dark ages and how it dealt with its citizenry, how it dealt with its public safety policies, how it dealt with redlining with banks.
In due time.
White folks sharing this city.
Urged by Councilmember Ragsdale, Crenshaw and Williams filed a new voting rights lawsuit in federal court. 2 years later, they would win their fight to create 14 districts small enough so minorities could afford to compete.
No disrespect to you.
But before that happened, there would be more dissent, as City Hall fought to keep larger districts under a compromise plan known as 10-4-1. Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price objected.
10-4-1 is not a plan of equity. The Voting Rights Act protects minorities in this state. You must submit it to the Justice Department, aside from the lawsuit that is pending.
The case was tried on the premise that the voting system in Dallas allowed whites to control who got elected. Civil rights attorney Betsy Julian expected a tough fight.
This case was about race, it was about racial discrimination, it was about a history of racial exclusion and minimization of participation in the political process.
Hispanics soon joined blacks as parties in the suit. The city fought hard to keep larger districts, but in the end, Judge Jerry Buckmeyer threw out the system that was in place and approved the Crenshaw-Williams 14-district concept. In November 1991, the two activists witnessed Dallas voters elect 4 African Americans, 2 Hispanics, and 9 whites, including the mayor.
And we broke everything down to where all of us could participate in it.
14-1 changed that whole dynamics of Dallas. That means the business establishment had to readjust itself. They had to come with a new playbook.
This is what it was all about, that White North Dallas was not picking the representatives for the African American and Latino communities.
Today, supporters of 14-1 see a dramatic difference in how Dallas divides its resources. In South Dallas, as well as North, there are new houses, streets, rail service, and libraries. Plans for developing the Trinity River Corridor in southern Dallas bring hope for prosperity. Domingo Garcia was elected to the first 14-1 council.
You had racial divisiveness, and to a large extent, 14-1 healed it. It's not perfect, but by having everybody at the table, you can compromise and negotiate, as opposed to having sort of a this versus them mentality at City Hall.
But some supporters of bigger districts, like former City Council member Donna Bloomer, believe the issue now is ward politics, council members protecting their district turf instead of the city as a whole.
This is my district, don't get involved in it, is really not very sensible, because some districts will go from one end of the city to the other and include a lot of people that are different, both in their economic status, in their race, their outlook.
But Crenshaw and Williams feel the democracy 14-1 brought to Big D outweighs any shortcomings. Although they ran for the council and lost, history will remember Williams and Crenshaw as the catalyst for change that ensured more minorities would have seats at Dallas City Hall. Today, minorities hold half the council seats, but what else about the city of Dallas has changed? 3 people involved in the transition join me now to talk about this. Diane Ragsdale served on the Dallas City Council from 1984 to 1991. She strongly supported single-member districts. She currently manages the Inner City Community Development Corporation. Rene Martinez is a past president of the Dallas chapter of the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC. He also sat on the Dallas Together task force that supported a compromise election plan that included some single-member districts and others that incorporated larger parts of the city. And Donna Halstead served on the first Dallas City Council elected under the current single-member district plan. Like Martinez, she supported the compromise plan. Ms. Halstead has been president of the Dallas Citizens Council since 1998. Thanks to all of you for being here.
Thank you.
Diane, I suspect the bites that we saw in that story are just going to follow you forever and a day.
It appears to be so.
Yes, but one in particular, where you question when whites would ever share the power.
Right.
20 years later, do you sense that that sharing of the power is going on now?
It has begun. There's no question about that. We have seen some differences, some changes, some improvement. There is a better allocation of resources and services directly as a result of 14-1. You will see some differences as indicated with respect to DART, with respect to minority contracting, with respect to housing development and economic development. Yes, you have begun to see some differences. You know, things are not going to change overnight. It takes time. This is a system that requires evolution, and it continues to evolve. And so, yes, there have been some changes.
Donna Halstead, would you agree with that? Or?
Oh, I think there's no question that there have been significant changes. But just as the way our city government functions has changed, the citizens of Dallas have changed too. There's been a clear recognition that we are all in the same boat, and that for one area to thrive, all areas must have some investment made for the city as a whole to grow and be what we want it to be. There has to be an investment across the city in bringing everybody up.
Rene Martinez, though, are there places or is there room for improvement?
Absolutely. I think this is a work in progress. You know, 20 years is basically a work in progress in terms of the system changing from what it had been. The one person, one vote concept is fundamental to this. So I think there's pluses and minuses, but I think the pluses outweigh the minuses in terms of the system working.
By example, how has the Latino community benefited from 14-1?
Well, no one would have ever guessed, even the demographers, that 20 years ago the Hispanic community, the Latino vote, would be what it is now in terms of population, in terms of not just in the city but in the schools, and now the emerging population as it relates to young people and the average age of folks that are in the Hispanic community and those that are becoming citizens. No one would have guessed that, and it's going to even grow a lot more over the next 5 years. So the whole demographics in terms of what is a southern sector. The southern sector is not just African American and Latino, it's the other way around now. It's predominantly Latino and African American. That's changed. Latino barrios are everywhere in Dallas, northwest, northeast, the core of the city. So the demographics is what's really surprised a lot of folks.
Well, you point to ways in which the southern sector has improved, but former City Plan Commissioner Betty Culbreth doesn't think southern Dallas has made any progress under the single-member district system.
I have not seen anything in 21 years change.
You're in a southern sector neighborhood.
Yes. I have seen the same vacant lot that the city of Dallas owns. I have seen the same weeds. I have driven over the same potholes on Hampton Road. I have seen the streets that used to be swept when I first moved my neighborhood, no longer swept. When I moved there, the shopping mall on Camp Wisdom was viable and shops were there. Today we have Macy's, a scaled down mall of Sears, and Burlington. I have to drive to Cedar Hill if I want to shop.
Okay, Diane, Renee, you say there has been progress in the southern sector. Betty Culbreth says no.
First of all, we have to start with A. You have to start at the beginning. And that is that 14-1 creates a greater opportunity for African Americans and Latinos to participate. A greater opportunity. That doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect, but there's a greater opportunity. And the other thing, though, we have to, it's an evolutionary process, it's an evolving process. And of course, I would disagree with her when we look at the bond packages with respect to the distribution of resources or projects within the bond package. You would see there's a significant amount for the northern half and the southern half, and particularly in housing and economic development. You actually have bond proceeds being utilized for housing and economic development in the southern half. That is extremely unusual. Routinely it was the federal dollar should be used for the disenfranchised communities. And so that attitude has changed. There's forward thinking going on. And so while things might not take place right now, even tomorrow, the key here is that the structure, it allows one to improve things. The structure allows for greater opportunity and increases the probability that public policy will be equitable. And that's the key, is to go back to A. Not that things are going to change immediately, but the structures in place which allows for more equitable resources.
Access to the system, Sam, also, in terms of bringing those services closer to the folks in the community. Right. And that was a whole premise, part of the premise of single-member districts, that folks in certain parts of the community, specifically Latinos and blacks, did not have access to that system to provide those services. Right. So again, it's a work in progress. It's going to take time. Right. The quality of candidates that are going to be elected is another issue. And so it's going to be a matter of time.
But I think also Betty makes a leap that is that many of us would have trouble with, and that is that somehow 14-1 was going to be the answer to all issues facing the southern sector. And I never heard any of the activists who were involved suggesting that simply by changing the shape of the districts, we were going to heal all the wounds in the southern sector. What it does is provide the public infrastructure to hopefully promote economic development long term. It changes the mindset at City Hall so that people understand that there is a role for government to play in promoting economic development in underserved areas, that there is a partnership there that must exist in order for us to jumpstart projects in the southern sector. So I think to have taken the leap that Betty took really is outside what anyone expected 14-1 to do. When you look at 14-1, and I think it's, and just to say it in another way, it's a system that promotes inclusion and not exclusion. And with that inclusion, you have more responsiveness. You have a more equitable public policy, more equitable public policies that are established. And so, it's a structure that's in place that can work much better than what we had previously.
On this issue, though, of responsiveness, one of the comments we heard from Donna Bloomer was that perhaps one of the downsides of 14-1 was what some are referring to as ward politics. That the prediction of that has come true. Fiefdoms, I believe, was the term that the Dallas Morning News used. But in essence, council members looking out for their own district and less so for a citywide perspective. Do you get a sense of that?
Sam, I don't think anyone would suggest that council members shouldn't look after the interests of their own district. The problem that we have seen come about as a product of an outcome of the 14-1 is that we have, for want of a better term, zoning czars. And in each area of the city, there are firm beliefs that the only person who has a right to have an opinion on a zoning case is the person who represents that area. And I think that has the potential to be short-sighted in terms of what's best for the city as a whole. There have been, thank goodness, efforts made to make certain that does not occur when we're talking about citywide assets, when we're talking about Fair Park or downtown or White Rock Lake or the Trinity. But when we're talking about individual development, we do tend to have a system in place that is, for want of a better term, zoning czars. And it can be a problem.
But is the resolution of that a problem with the voting system, or is that a leadership issue?
That, I think, is the key. I'm not so sure that's systemic. I think it goes back to the type of individuals or council persons that have been elected that have that mentality that Donna's saying. And I think she's absolutely right about that. But in terms of saying that because of single-member districts we created a fiefdom and that it's had impact on the system, I'm not sure that premise is there yet. It could become that. I don't think it is. It's a quality of people, the type of leaders that we elect that may not have that mentality, hopefully, that the fiefdom mentality, so to speak.
And with 14-1, you're expected to represent your district. There's no question about that. With 14-1, as Renee has indicated, the government is closer to the people, and the intent is to have more responsiveness as well as more accountability. I mean, that's another thing that comes with 14-1. You have more accountability because you have smaller districts. But I don't necessarily see one completely ignoring the citywide issues, if you will. The other thing, though, and I think Mayor Leppert is evolving into this, that when you have a strong mayor with a good personality, is what I'm saying, whereby he or she needs to be able to pull people together and to create that type of citywide thought process. But the key, though, you have different districts, you have different slices of the pie. And the different slices of the pie, and that's just make up the whole pie. And so different districts make up the whole city. And that's what is happening, along with the fact that the mayor has to step forward and say, give me some priorities, let's work together on them, and to provide that leadership as well. And that's why we didn't go to all single member districts. We wanted a citywide person who is the mayor, who can provide the leadership through personality, if you will, to in essence say we can come together, let's come together on these various issues. And he's moving toward that.
And with that, we'll have to end it right there. Thank you all for joining me. Racial tension in two North Texas suburbs recently has fueled lawsuits similar to the one that changed Dallas. Attorney Domingo Garcia is a leader in the push for change in Irving and one of the lawyers who filed the suit in Farmers Branch.
Here we are 10 years after 14-1, and we have single member district lawsuits being filed in Farmers Branch and Irving by Latinos. Unfortunately, history repeats itself. You would think that the Anglo establishment and the Tim O'Hares of Farmers Branch would have learned from the Dallas City Council of 1990 and from the political establishment of 1990, but they're repeating the same mistakes. And that polarization and to a large extent some of that hate mongering really needs to subside. And I think we have a lot more things that unite us than divide us. And I think Farmers Branch eventually will get it, as so will Irving.
With me now to discuss the latest on single-member district developments are Dr. Ruth Morgan, Provost Emeritus and Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Southern Methodist University. She chronicled the legal fight for single-member districts in her book, Governance by Decree.